Let's kick off this explainer by completely shattering how we look at one of the world's most famous ancient wonders. When you think of the Great Wall of China, you probably picture beauty, right? Millions of tourists walking those perfectly restored steps, snapping gorgeous drone photos right at sunset. But the history we're digging into today makes one thing abundantly clear. This massive structure wasn't built to be beautiful, and it literally had zero to do with tourism. It was born out of one primal, overwhelming emotion: fear. So today, we're going to step back in time. We're tossing out the camera lens and putting you straight into the heavy boots of an ancient frontier soldier, stationed at the very edge of the known world.
Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we've got that postcard image in our heads. Safe, cultivated, stunning. But for you, the soldier freezing on that northern frontier, reality was an absolute nightmare. We're talking bone-chilling nights, inescapable, constant fear, and desperate signaling fires. See, for centuries, the emperors of China looked north and just saw this endless, terrifying emptiness. Out of those steppes came horsemen who were as swift and unpredictable as a massive storm. These warriors would appear out of nowhere, burn villages to the ground, steal the crops, and then just vanish back into the mist. It was the kind of terror that literally kept emperors awake at night and left entire generations terrified.
And that exact terror leads us directly to the chilling, foundational question that drove the creation of this absolute monster of a structure. How much can the safety of an empire cost, in lives and in fear? Because, before it was this single continuous serpent of stone that we think of today, it was just a really messy collection of fragile earth walls and wooden forts. It wasn't until an emperor, who was totally obsessed with unifying everything from rules to roads to borders, decided that all those gaps just had to disappear. And filling those gaps, creating one impenetrable barrier across mountains and deserts, well, that required a human sacrifice on a scale that is honestly hard to wrap your head around.
Section 1. Moving mountains by hand. The brutal reality of construction.
I want you to imagine being a farmer from the south. You're ripped away from your family and pushed all the way to a jagged mountain crest where there is zero roads and the winters are absolutely lethal. There's no heavy machinery here to help you out. First, you're dragging massive, jagged stone blocks entirely by hand until your palms literally bleed. Then, you're pushing that crushing weight up unbelievably steep, treacherous slopes where just one single slip means a deadly fall. And finally, you're loading incredibly heavy baskets of rubble directly onto your own bruised, battered shoulders. And you know what? Stopping just isn't an option. Because if you stop, you're replaced, left behind, and entirely forgotten in the wilderness.
I really want you to feel the sensory reality of this quote from our sources: rows of men pass the weight back to back like a living chain. Just picture it. The construction site is this deafening, chaotic symphony of suffering. You've got the sharp, endless blows of hammers cracking against solid stone, the shouted, relentless orders from commanders echoing around you, and the heavy, dragging footsteps of thousands upon thousands of men, all moving together like one single, exhausted organism just to build the emperor's impossible dream.
The contrast of your daily existence out there is just staggering. Daytime is that chaotic, deafening symphony of hammers and shouted orders we just talked about. But nighttime brings a completely different kind of psychological torture. It's dead silent. There's nothing but a tiny, crackling fire keeping the freezing wind at bay. And there, sitting in the pitch dark, your totally exhausted mind just races. You're thinking about the family you left behind way down in the south, while simultaneously dreading the terrifying, looming threat of those horsemen hiding just beyond the pitch-black horizon.
Section 2. Watching the endless steppe. Life inside the isolated garrison.
Now you have to remember, the wall isn't some perfect, magical force field. Invaders could still find openings. They could bribe commanders or simply ride right over frozen rivers in the dead of winter. It was really just designed to slow them down. And what that means is that you have to live inside it, constantly on guard. As a conscripted soldier stuck in one of these isolated watchtowers, your reality is incredibly bleak. You're sleeping on hard wooden planks, you're surviving on a super meager diet of plain rice, you're enduring the kind of bone-chilling cold that cuts right through you. But honestly, the worst part? It's the crushing, unending solitude.
The psychological weight of this agonizing vigil is basically your primary duty. Your entire existence out there boils down to three repetitive things. 1. Observing the sky, constantly calculating if the weather is going to give an enemy the perfect cover to approach. 2. Staring out at the empty plains, desperately searching for that terrifying faint cloud of dust that means horses are on the move. And 3. Watching the horizon for smoke signals from the neighboring towers. You spend years just staring into the emptiness, simply waiting for sudden death to arrive.
Section 3. A network of fire. The ancient alarm system. And this brilliantly illustrates how the wall actually functioned. It turned you and your freezing comrades into these tiny nodes within a massive human alarm system. Braziers and highly flammable materials are always prepped and waiting at strategic points. So if you spot movement, your life instantly depends on this strict code. 1 suddenly lit fire means you've got a sighting. 2 fires means there's imminent severe danger. And 3 fires? That signals a massive coordinated invasion is already underway. In mere minutes, with shaking hands, you have to transmit a literal message of life or death.
The sheer ingenuity of this network is really kind of breathtaking when you think about it. Imagine seeing a line of lights suddenly sparking to life in the pitch darkness, instantly connecting distant mountain peaks and deep valleys. This visual signal traveled infinitely faster than the absolute swiftest horse could ever run. It acted like a high-speed communication highway, allowing the heart of the empire to react, mobilize its forces, and send reinforcements way before the invading enemy could ever reach those vulnerable cities down south.
Section 4. The True Cost of Stone. Debunking Myths and Facing Reality.
So, over the centuries, the wall slowly evolved from just tamped earth into the burnt brick fortified corridor we all recognize today. But let's take a second to dismantle one of the modern world's most pervasive legends. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the contrast. We've all heard the myth, right? That the Great Wall is this luminous line crossing Asia, this single human-made object you can see from space with the naked eye. Well, in reality, if you're up in orbit, it's actually incredibly difficult to discern. It's really just a thin scar that blends almost perfectly into the mountains, the rivers, and the fields. Its overwhelming power was never meant for space. It's always been deeply grounded right here in the Earth.
And that grounding is incredibly, deeply tragic. There's this ingrained belief in China, perfectly captured in this really chilling quote. The wall was literally built on the bones of those who worked it. Now, while historians might debate the literal truth of whether there are actual bodies mixed into the mortar of every single section, this beautifully and terribly describes the true reality of the place. The human cost was absolutely astronomical. It's a frontier built not just out of stone and brick, but quite literally out of the very lives of the men who suffered and died right beside you.
So, the absolutely crucial point I want you to take away from this explainer is this. The wall is not just an architectural marvel. It is the ultimate physical manifestation of political control. It's the grand sum of the crippling fears of emperors, their massive ambitions, the backbreaking work, and the ultimate heartbreaking sacrifices of millions of conscripted farmers, prisoners, and soldiers. We're talking about millions of individual people with shattered personal destinies, people whose names we will literally never know and who never, ever got the chance to go home.
Which leaves us with this final thought. We've journeyed all the way from the deafening, brutal noise of its construction to the freezing, terrifyingly silent nights of the soldiers who manned those remote towers. So, the next time you see a picture of the Great Wall, or hey, perhaps even walk its steps yourself someday, are you just going to see beautiful ancient stone? Or will you see the fear, the crushing isolation, and the immense human sacrifice of the millions who stood watch in the dark? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really look forward to exploring our next topic with you soon.